Let's get right into it. Number 9, the Taxidermy Hoax. Some of the most basic facts you know today were once considered flat-out biological impossibilities by the smartest people in the room. Picture London in 1799. A dead specimen of a truly bizarre creature has just arrived from Australia. It looks like the biological equivalent of a Frankenstein monster, a duck's bill, webbed feet, and a furry beaver-like body. The top zoologists at the British Museum take one look at this thing and declare it a complete, laughable impossibility. Their immediate conclusion is that it has to be a prank. They assume some clever taxidermist literally stitched a bird's beak onto a water rat just to make fools out of the British scientific elite. Prominent zoologist George Shaw is so stubbornly convinced it's a fake that he grabs a pair of heavy scissors and physically hacks into the pelt. He digs around the neck, desperately searching for the hidden threads holding the entire hoax together. He finds absolutely nothing. No stitches, no glue, no hidden seams. The animal is completely, undeniably real. To deal with this impossible creature, the scientific establishment had to swallow their pride and invent an entirely new category of egg-laying mammals, monotremes, just to accommodate it. Because, as it turns out, nature really doesn't care about our neat little categorization systems. Number 8. The Immobile Earth Dogma. In the early 20th century, geologists knew one thing for absolute certain. The Earth's crust was static. Mountains were just wrinkles forming as the planet cooled and shrank. Then, in 1912, a meteorologist named Alfred Wegener pointed out something obvious. The continents fit together perfectly, like giant puzzle pieces, and shared the exact same ancient fossils across entire oceans. He proposed that the landmasses were actually moving. The geological elite didn't just disagree, they set out to destroy his reputation. Because he was a weatherman, they publicly dismissed his theory of continental drift as delirious ravings and dangerous pseudoscience. Wegener spent his life fighting the consensus, eventually freezing to death on a Greenland expedition in 1930, still widely considered a crackpot. It took another 2 decades and the invention of Cold War submarine sonar to accidentally prove him right. When military ships mapped the sea floor in the 1950s, they discovered massive spreading ridges. The Earth's crust wasn't a static, drying apple. It was cracked into shifting tectonic plates, constantly grinding against each other. It took over 40 years of denial for the scientific establishment to accept physical reality. The single biggest geological discovery in history was made by an outsider they completely despised. Number 7. The Kraken Substrate. For hundreds of years, enlightened scientists agreed that the Kraken was nothing but a myth. When sailors came back to port claiming they saw massive, tentacled sea monsters, academics completely dismissed them. They wrote the stories off as hallucinations, bad rum, or just floating logs mistaken for something terrifying. Then, in the late 1800s, the ocean started spitting the truth back out. Massive 40-foot carcasses literally began washing up on beaches in Newfoundland and New Zealand. Science suddenly had to classify a creature they had treated as a literal fairy tale. They named it Architeuthis dux. This was a real-life monster the size of a school bus, driven by a biological quirk called deep-sea gigantism, with eyes the literal size of dinner plates. Yet, even with physical bodies rotting on the sand, the creature remained an absolute ghost in its own habitat. It took until the year 2004 for researcher Tsunemi Kubodera to finally photograph one alive in the freezing depths. Sure, these giant squids weren't actually pulling down entire pirate ships like the legends claimed, but the evidence proved the core of the ancient folklore was right all along. The working-class sailors weren't drunk. The scientists just didn't want it to get their feet wet. Number 6. The Hobbit Anomaly. If you open an older biology textbook, the story of human evolution looks like a straight, confident march to the finish line. Science assumed that for the last 100,000 years, modern humans had the entire planet to themselves. That comforting illusion shattered in 2003. Researchers digging in an Indonesian cave unearthed a skull that completely broke the timeline. It belonged to a fully grown adult female, but she stood just 3.5 feet tall with a brain the size of a chimpanzee's. At first, desperate skeptics tried to explain the bones away as just a modern human suffering from a rare growth disorder. But further excavations confirmed the impossible. This wasn't a medical fluke. It was an entirely unknown, distinct species of human classified as Homo floresiensis. They were shaped by insular dwarfism, an evolutionary rule where mammals drastically shrink when trapped on isolated islands with limited resources. Looking at their remains is like staring at a parallel universe version of humanity. They survived right alongside us until roughly 50,000 years ago, leaving us with a very eerie shadow. We were not the only humans on this earth nearly as recently as we thought. Number 5. The Scaly reptile myth. For over a century, science and pop culture completely agreed on one core image. Dinosaurs were giant, terrifying, scaly green reptiles. That was the undisputed textbook visual. Then, in the 1990s, paleontologists digging in China's Liaoning province started finding fossils with very strange halos around their bones. At first glance, you might assume it was just a rock anomaly, but the physical evidence was undeniable. They were fossilized feathers. In 1996, the discovery of Sinosauropteryx forced a massive scientific paradigm shift. It proved that even ground-dwelling dinosaurs that couldn't fly were actually fluffy. Science had to completely redraw the family tree. Theropod dinosaurs weren't evolutionary dead ends at all. They literally became modern birds. It completely shatters the Jurassic Park visual we all grew up with. The most terrifying apex predators in Earth's history didn't look like Godzilla. They probably looked more like a massive, angry cassowary. Number 4. The stress ulcer myth. Imagine knowing doctors are so wrong that you willingly chug a beaker of bacteria just to prove a point. In the 1980s, the consensus was that stomach ulcers were caused by stress and spicy food. The only treatment was antacids or surgery. So, when Dr. Barry Marshall claimed a bacteria called H. pylori was the real cause, the medical community laughed, insisting nothing could survive stomach acid. What they missed was that this bacteria secretes an enzyme that neutralizes the acid around it. It creates a protective force field to burrow directly into the stomach lining. Tired of being ignored, Marshall took a mad scientist risk in 1984. He brewed a cloudy broth loaded with the pathogen and drank it. Within days, he developed massive inflammation. He biopsied his own stomach, proved the infection was real, and cured himself with standard antibiotics. While stress can worsen an ulcer, Marshall proved it isn't the root cause. His self-experiment saved millions from unnecessary surgeries. He won the 2005 Nobel Prize, proving that sometimes you just have to biohack your own gut to win an argument with arrogant doctors. Number 3. The Impossible Pathogen. There used to be an unbreakable rule in biology known as the central dogma. It stated that for anything to be infectious and replicate, it absolutely must contain genetic material like DNA or RNA. When scientists started investigating terrifying brain-wasting diseases like mad cow, they spent years desperately searching for a virus or a bacteria. They found nothing. In 1982, researcher Stanley Prusiner suggested something that was considered outright scientific heresy. He proposed that the infection wasn't alive at all. He claimed it was caused entirely by a single, misshapen protein with zero DNA. He called it a prion. The scientific community immediately mocked the idea, insisting that a mere shape couldn't possibly act like an infectious agent. But Prusiner's impossible hypothesis was completely right, earning him a Nobel Prize in 1997. A prion is essentially a structural template. When this misfolded protein bumps into a normal one, it physically forces the healthy protein to change shape and misfold too. It acts like a biological domino effect, spreading an apocalyptic chain reaction inside the brain without ever actually reproducing. It is a 100% fatal disease caused by nothing more than bad geometry. Number 2. The Forbidden Symmetry chemistry used to have very strict rules about what a crystal was allowed to look like. According to the absolute laws of crystallography, a 5-fold rotational symmetry was mathematically forbidden. It was considered physically impossible. So when Dan Shechtman looked through an electron microscope in 1982 and saw exactly that, a crystal pattern that never perfectly repeated, his colleagues thought he was losing his mind. The academic backlash was brutal. Shechtman was actually laughed right out of his own research group. Linus Pauling, a legendary scientist with 2 Nobel Prizes to his name, publicly humiliated him. Pauling confidently announced to the world that there is no such thing as quasi-crystals, only quasi-scientists. Schechtman spent years fighting simply to get his raw data published. But the physical evidence was undeniable. The impossible aperiodic mosaic pattern was absolutely real. Eventually, the International Union of Crystallography was forced to entirely rewrite their definition of a crystal to admit he was right. In 2011, Schechtman was awarded his own Nobel Prize in Chemistry, proving once and for all that even the most famous scientific gods can be spectacularly wrong. Number 1. The extinct ghostfish. According to every single paleontology textbook on Earth, the coelacanth went extinct exactly 65 million years ago. It supposedly died out right alongside the T-Rex, known only as a ghost locked in ancient rock imprints. It was a completely settled scientific fact. That absolute certainty evaporated on a shipping dock in South Africa in 1938. A museum curator named Marjorie Courtenay Latimer was casually digging through a local fisherman's daily catch. Hidden in the pile, she spotted something impossible. It was a massive, 5-foot-long armored fish with strange blue fins. It looked like absolutely nothing else alive in the modern ocean. She quickly sketched it and sent the drawing to an ichthyologist for identification. When the expert received the telegram, he later said the sheer shock was like looking out his window and seeing a dinosaur walking down the street. It was a living, breathing coelacanth. It had survived the catastrophic asteroid impact and quietly hid in the deep ocean for 65 million years, while arrogant textbooks confidently declared it dead. This living fossil, known as a Lazarus taxon, is the ultimate humbling finale to a century of scientific hubris. It is the ultimate reminder that this planet is much better at keeping secrets than we are at finding them.